his last dance. It's a bittersweet end for him, but we are transitioning back to our player profile series where some running backs get introduced into this kind of menage of a player profile series. Without further ado, let's introduce our next player, and he should be an exciting one. Our next player, not CJ Stroud, is, of course, perhaps the best fantasy running back you could ever hope to have in Christian McCaffrey. Whereas I started off today's show with two quarterbacks who have the profiles to be stellar fantasy quarterbacks, they definitely aren't necessarily in the conversation just yet. Christian McCaffrey has always been in the conversation at the top fantasy running back at the current moment. Last year, let's just go over his stats. He led all running backs last year with 24.7 PPR points. That's one thing to remember with Christian McCaffrey. He is so versatile in how he plays. Fantastic out of the backfield, not just as a rusher. And so, that's something of note. He's had 1,541 fantasy points in his career, which is surprisingly low for him, but obviously he's a running back, and also he did play for the Carolina Panthers for a large part of his career. His best season was actually as a Carolina Panther, so to speak, in 2019, where he had 355.2 fantasy points. Last year, he finished as the running back one, obviously, in 81% of his games. He was in the top 24 in every game he played last year. Averaged 21 touches and 126.5 yards per game. Second in carries, fourth in targets, and first in red zone touches. So Christian McCaffrey is here, he's there, he's everywhere. This is the projections for next season: 1,250 yards, 11 TDs on the ground, 570 yards for the air, 5 receiving touchdowns for a total of 280.6 fantasy points. So, let's talk about him. Obviously, I can sit here and tell you that Christian McCaffrey is one of the most no-brainer picks. He's going to be the number one overall pick in so many different fantasy leagues, no matter the format, just because of the value he gives you at the running back position. However, there are some moments of pause in his game. Not as much for other running backs and other players, but there certainly are some things to be skeptical about, such as when and not if he will ever fall off. I know it's kind of weird to say that a guy like Christian McCaffrey is ever going to fall off, but there are some cracks seeping through his game and the way he's getting injured, especially, that could spell an ominous kind of downfall for a guy like Christian McCaffrey. But at the moment, he's sitting very pretty in the San Francisco 49ers offense. He doesn't necessarily have anyone challenging him for touches in the backfield. Elijah Mitchell might get some touches, but honestly, there's no other running back who can rival what Christian McCaffrey does in the field. And that's one of the reasons they keep him out there for as long as they do, for as many touches as he does. But that also adds to the fact that he might get injured more often. Because the more and more San Francisco play him, the more chances he's going to get injured, especially when they're in the red zone and Christian McCaffrey is tasked with, getting that last inch or yard for a touchdown. That's a toll on a running back's body that people don't often necessarily see. But it certainly affects someone like Christian McCaffrey, who, while one of the best at doing that kind of thing, isn't prone to injury. He's not superhuman. And so that's one of the worrying things that could happen, and as a caveat and a potential block to what Christian McCaffrey can be over the next couple of years. I think this year for Christian McCaffrey is going to be very pivotal, because if he doesn't get injured and he plays like a running back one, I'm going to continue to sing his praises, and everyone's going to continue to sing his praises as a top fantasy running back. However, we'll have to see how Kyle Shanahan decides to use his other running backs. This has to be more of a running back by committee. As weird as it says, because of the fact that Christian McCaffrey ensures you at least one rushing touchdown per game, you have to consider his health. His health has to be the number one priority to preserve him for even bigger games and big moments. And so, if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm taking the risk, playing Elijah Mitchell a bit more, and have Christian McCaffrey come in, maybe out of the backfield, because he's such a versatile player. That's the thing about Christian McCaffrey. He doesn't have to play often to make an impact. He just has to play in a way that he can get the ball in space and make some noise in the field. And so, if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm saying, okay, I have to consider Elijah Mitchell out of the backfield. CMC is going to get a lot of touches. It's concerning. He might get injured, so I'm going to have to consider playing Elijah Mitchell for some snaps and get Christian McCaffrey on the field in situations where opposing defenses might least expect it, or in situations where I can get him out in space, because that's where Christian McCaffrey operates the best, is where he gets all his yards from, ultimately where you get most of your fantasy points from if you draft him. Now, in terms of his draft standing, I don't think anything is going to change in the next 3 years to dissuade anyone from picking Christian McCaffrey as the number one pick in their drafts. And here's why. I can sit here and say, oh, Christian McCaffrey's getting injured. But it's the San Francisco 49ers. Their team built to, no matter what happens to them, sustain their level of play on the pitch. They will be dominant no matter what. Whether or not guys like Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Brock Purdy all stay on the field together. And Christian McCaffrey is also a huge part of that. The 49ers won't go as Christian McCaffrey goes. And so, if you add Christian McCaffrey to the San Francisco 49ers offense, it immediately becomes an unstoppable force. And so, I think that when you're considering a team like the San Francisco 49ers, where ultimately is our team that spreads the wealth, obviously the biggest player is perhaps going to be the running back, because of the fact that A, is the only person to break up the kind of play action system QB scheme that San Fran has going on for Purdy, and B, in that system, Christian McCaffrey just adds more versatility than any of the other players even can. Yes, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are top-level wide receivers. Yes, George Kittle might just be at least the second best fantasy tight end in the league. But Christian McCaffrey just makes a whole nother dimension possible for the San Francisco 49ers team. And that's why I think he's going to be a high-level pick for this squad and in fantasy. Until Christian McCaffrey is injured for a long period of time, or Elijah Mitchell gets more touches, then I see no concern as to why you don't draft him at number one. But that should just about do it for Christian McCaffrey. Coming up next, we have another exciting quarterback who's quickly ascending through the ranks to get into at least the top 5, in my humble opinion, in terms of fantasy running backs. We will be right back to end the show with him.